Hello, brothers and sisters. Welcome to this broadcast. Mark DeJesus here today, bringing you insights for your healing and freedom journey, especially when it comes to mental, emotional, and relationship health. If today's broadcast is blessing you in your life and your journey, go to markdejesus.com, subscribe to our email newsletter. By doing so, you'll get a free ebook on experiencing God's love as your Father. That will be a great journey for your life. You can also support the broadcast. You can look up topics that are specific to what you're going through and what you're working through. So today, what I want to get into is I want to get into the topic of perfectionism some more. I've been doing a series on it. I do a lot of content on it. Perfectionism goes into a lot of different territories and how it affects our life. Today, I want to talk about what's the opposite of perfectionism. Many people will write to me and say, okay, Mark, I get this perfectionism thing, but what is life supposed to look like? What does it look like outside of this constant bondage and pressure that perfectionism brings about? And so today I want to kind of dive into that and bring you some feedback that I've discovered on my journey that could be helpful for you. And the cool thing about what I get to do here is I get to grow and share with you in my growth journey. Years and years ago, I took perfectionism and I was contrasting it, and this is going to be like a next level to that. And I'll explain what I mean in just a moment. But let's talk about perfectionism quickly. When we talk about perfectionism, it is the mindset of just right, but never enough. So this can go into a lot of different directions. It can make you very obsessive compulsive. It can make you very obsessed with order, cleanliness. It can make you very controlling. It can steal your peace, your spiritual life, how you go about your work, how you go about the craft of creative expression. It can go into so many areas of your life. But if I'm to narrow it down, it's this mindset of just right and never enough. And it constantly keeps you in that cycle. The good news is that you can live free from this bondage. But what I want to do today is navigate a little bit of a journey with you. Let's take a journey, shall we, about what life looks like when perfectionism is not the dominant influence, of what freedom looks like. And many of you are asking that. What is the opposite of it? What does health look like? What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some words, because I'll give you a spoiler here. The answer to this question is not just one word. It's multifaceted, because perfectionism invades many areas of our life. And it has door points or ways of living that feed perfectionism. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring out some healing words that you can begin to connect to when it comes to what is life like apart from perfectionism, or the opposite of it. One word that's come to mind for my journey and I found helpful is the word excellence. Now, when I first began to contrast perfectionism and excellence, I used this word. And in fact, I even wrote some material on it about the difference between perfectionism and excellence. It could be a part of a healthier standard, so to speak, of what living could be like. But here's what I discovered. I discovered that so many people are so ingrained in perfectionism that they mask over their perfectionism with saying, this is excellence. And years ago in my pastoring work, we would use the word excellence, and we would promote that. And it can hide a lot of perfectionism. It's like a rewording, a rebranding. Now, I'm not saying excellence is a bad word, but I found even in my reading online, many people say the opposite of perfectionism is healthy striving. And really, it's heavy striving. It's healthy striving. And I found in reading the scriptures that striving is this pressurized, driven angst in trying to get somewhere. And really what the Bible says is, if anything you're going to be driven to, get into rest. I'll get into that in just a moment. One of the things that I found myself trying to define excellence, because we're like, okay, getting free from perfectionism as a culture doesn't mean we're just doing nothing and who cares. See, that's a sign of perfectionism, black and white. That we got to swing it to the other side. It's not that. It's learning to get grounded. It's not this extreme, that extreme. It's getting grounded. It's getting into a balance isn't even the word. It's a grounded, deeper maturing that's taking place in our life. But I would often talk about, and other people say this too, I didn't invent this, that the sense of excellence is giving the best with what you have. And I added to it, giving your best with what you have and where you're at. So it's two things. One is you look at what's in your hand, like God looked at Moses and said, show me, your hand, show me what's there. God isn't expecting us to give out of something that we don't have, right? And that's a whole journey in itself of insecurity. I don't feel like I have anything. That's a whole another subject in itself. But excellence in a healthy context is really, here's what I have. I'm giving it the best that I know to do right now, and where I'm at in my journey. Because see, maybe in your season of your life where you're dealing with health issues, and excellence wouldn't mean necessarily where you were when you didn't have health issues. Or maybe someone in your family is going through something, or you're healing from some stuff in your journey, and you got to take your season into perspective. So I would often, in my pastoral work, say excellence given the best with what you have and where you're at. And I think that can lead you into some healthier perspectives. But I don't want to stop there, because many people, excellence, it's like, I need more words to this. So instead of just giving you one word, I'm going to move into some more. Another one, it's kind of a technical term, but it just makes sense. Depressurization. It's taking the pressure off. Many of you need to open the depressurizing valve. Now, I was looking up this word depressurization, and there was some engineering nerd talk, and they were talking about the dangers of depressurizing too fast. And I was like, oh, that's an interesting thought, because for many perfectionists, if they try to depressurize too fast, it's like they can't handle it. Their system can't handle. Like they have to have a journey of slowly moving into a no pressure kind of world, because when they take the pressure off, there's so much residue of anxiety and guilt and self-pressure that they are used to living under. But the thing I want to bring out about freedom from perfectionism is one person can be doing the same activity as another person. So you have two people doing the same activity. One can be under the influence of perfectionism, the other one not. And so as I talk more, I'm going to get into the fruit of what those differences look like. And one of the dominant things is no pressure. But we have to look at what's causing pressure. Is it exterior factors as well as interior factors of how we believe and see ourselves, how we feel we need to have worth, how we feel we're going to be loved? So a big part of getting free from perfectionism is releasing of the pressure. That's a big part of it. Another word, and this comes from a biblical standpoint for sure, is a term called rest, biblical rest. The Hebrew writer expressed today, there is a rest available for the people of God. Get into it. It's the one place where the Bible is like, be driven. It's like, hurry up and get into rest. And for perfectionists, they see rest as being lazy, as being unproductive, as being just very passive. That is because they have been so trained and conditioned that if it's to be, life is in my hands, and the pressure. See, it's all about what's motivating the journey. Because like I said, you can have a great business, you can have great things that take place in your life, but not have pressure. And the neat thing is when we let go of perfectionism, we start entering into rest, we see more of what God is doing and what he's at work doing. Perfectionists can't see what God's doing because they're in a constant spin of pressure trying to spin over their thoughts or whatever's happening. It's hard to see what God's doing. So you have an internal belief, I got to make it happen. It's all up to me and I got to do it just right. And so you struggle to see the grace. You struggle to see the grace because you think all the pressure's on you. You struggle to see the grace because you avoid your weaknesses. You don't want anybody seeing your weaknesses, your flaws, your mistakes, your failures. So you avoid those. So Perfectionists are constantly striving and hiding, hiding their weaknesses, mistakes, and failures because they don't want anybody to know and see that, because then they won't be unloved. I'll get into that some more here. And so it doesn't allow them to enter into rest, and they don't have a connection to the love of the Father that allows them to go, okay, you got this. So I can go about my day, because rest is not passive. Rest does not mean you're sleeping all day. Rest is a condition of the heart. It's a posture in your heart that is yielding to the work and the grace that God is doing. You're participating with it, but you're not overworking yourself, and you're also not passive, just sitting around doing nothing. So I think that's a helpful word for us to understand, is rest. Another word that has been helpful is this word contentment. I'll get into that some more in the rest of this broadcast. But perfectionists have a hard time with contentment. It's not really in their vocabulary. And I've had to learn to welcome it and really begin to understand more and more what contentment means for the believer. Another word I want to encourage you in, as you get free from perfectionism. Interestingly enough, when I went on the Google and typed in what's the opposite of perfectionism, one of the words that came up is acceptance. And I have found in my life, as I have learned to let go of perfectionistic tendencies, I have let go more of control, let go more of having to do things right, having to keep everything together, to keep an image or a presentation going of something, of who I am, and lean more into unconditional love, that the Father loves me today, right here and right now, and he receives me in relationship. For perfectionists, especially religious perfectionists, they equate acceptance as compromise. So if I say God loves me unconditionally, that means he's just putting a blind eye to all my sins, and I can't accept that. And see, they have a very black and white thing, that God is either screaming at them about their sins, or the only alternative is God doesn't think at all about sin and just do whatever you want. And it really shows how much we have been unloved in our journey. And today's a day to start experiencing unconditional love in a whole new way. And so it's caused me to look at situations more accepting versus that perfectionistic, I've got to change, I got to do something, I got to fix. Because when I look at things more with a loving acceptance, I see it for what it is. I value relationship, I value the moment, and I don't become obsessed with fixing. We become very obsessed as Christians with fixing. We got to call other people out in their sins. We got to call out stuff that's wrong. We don't know how to wait and walk with people where it's relationship first. I want to build relationship, and out of relationship growth, these things begin to come to the surface and change happens. Religious perfectionism is a killer because it's obsessed with how things look, making things just right. Meanwhile, there's a lot of shame underneath and a lot of unhealed brokenness. So acceptance allows you to accept more where you're at. Okay, this is where I'm at in my life. This is where I'm at in my journey. And many perfectionists, the healing journey is actually some grieving, some processing to get to a place of really seeing where you are for what it is and seeing those around you for where they are. Now it makes you more positioned for fruitful relationships. Are you following me so far? I'm getting a lot out of this. I found that freedom from, there's some other words I would use too, is as I engage more freedom from perfectionism, I'm way more patient. Way more patient. You don't need to ask God to give you patience. You're going to have plenty of circumstances that are going to cause you to practice, to learn. And when you have that just right scenario, you become very impatient because you need things to be a certain way. You need your environment, your surroundings, people, your thoughts, situations, God, stuff, your future. I need it all. I need it in a certain way. Let patience have its perfect work. Perfectionists actually need to learn that scripture. We think of let perfect have its perfect work. I think let just right have its perfect work. Let striving have its perfect work. And the Bible says, nah, let patience have its perfect. It's going to do a work of wholeness in your life. Another word that's helpful for me is the word kindness. It has revolutionized my life to understand how kind God is. That he's gentle, he's kind, that in all my struggles and all my flailing in anger or sad frustration, whatever the words would be in the given moment. And he's kind towards me. I'm forever grateful for that. And the more I release the perfectionistic burdens that want to come on my life and my thinking, I'm kind to myself because God is kind to me. And therefore, that's going to get reflected in how I interact with you. I'm learning too that in freedom from perfectionism, a word that comes to mind is flexibility. You're more resilient. You're able to recover from challenges, to have a flexibility. Perfectionists are they're lacking that emotional, relational flexibility. There's a rigidity about them that they can't loosen up. They can't have fun. And this flexibility is something, learning to be flexible in life. And I found there's a bunch of lesses. What do I mean by that? Less agitated, less angry, less irritable, less harsh, less controlling. I find these words manifesting in people that are getting free from perfectionism. So let me take another step here and let me contrast this some more for you. So I want to put some language and some wordings to help you in your journey, okay? The first here, we're going to talk about life with and without perfectionism. I'm going to contrast it, and you can allow discernment to increase in your life. Maybe you want to come back and revisit it and see this a second time and take some notes, but just let this wash over your heart. Here's some things I'm learning and discovering. You can take this and see, where does that impact my life? Let's talk about pressure, because with perfectionism, the dominant fruit is the emotional pressure of just right, never enough. It influences your emotions, decisions, and actions. You feel it at the end of the day. You feel it in your muscles, you feel it in your joints, you feel it in your mind. Now, without perfectionism, we can give all of ourselves, but we're not under pressure. We're able to be present and enjoy the experience. That's one of the things that freedom from perfectionism brings, is you're able to lean into enjoyment. Perfectionists can't enjoy things. They're always spun out about something. And so freedom from it involves, we learn in the journey. I'm learning. I get this adventure now. I'm growing. I'm maturing. And my relationships improve along the way. A great sign of freedom from perfectionism is your relationships improve because you're no longer pressurized, and now you're able to flow in kindness, grace, and patience and love and those kind of things. In perfectionism, when it comes to your value and worth is based on your performance. What you do, how well you do it. It's like you're constantly performance evaluating yourself, your journey, and even others. It steals your peace. There's a lie underneath this. Perfectionists believe, I can't be myself. You cannot be yourself. You've got to be an achiever, or you've got to present a just right image. And it creates this constant emotional pressure that steals your peace. Without perfectionism, your value and worth is in who you are. You are a loved son or daughter of God. But we've not been taught how to be loved right where we're at. And so many of you are learning to disconnect your attachment that says you'll be loved when your performance, how you do things is better. We're disconnecting that. No, I'm loved right where I'm at right now. When it comes to personal standards, with perfectionism, your standards create unending pressure, stress, constant disturbance, and even torment. It keeps nagging you, and it won't stop. But without perfectionism, your standards are not demanding and controlling. Why? Because your expectation is surrounded by love. And when my expectation is surrounded by love, how I see myself, how I see others is not pressurized and angry, because my goal is to love my neighbor as myself. In your expectations, when you have, and these are expectations for yourself and for others. Under perfectionism, goals are set for yourself and others that are unreasonable and often impossible. And what you'll see in perfectionism is there's an underlying anger that's there. It's an underlying anger. It's their fuel. It's what influences their expectations. And it can lead people to feel uneasy relating to you. Because it's like, you feel like you're going to just point out something. There's just that edge of anger. Not that you're constantly lashing out. And then when you do, you try to backpedal real quick because you're ashamed that the anger came out. Because there's a deep shame within perfectionism. But without it, your expectations are covered by appreciation. So my focus is more, I'm just grateful to be with you. I'm grateful in my life and journey. I focus more on appreciation. So I'm not so focused on these intense expectations being met. Perfectionists are always like expectation focused. And so everyone's always disqualified. Everyone's always going under their expectation, and they lack appreciation. So therefore, they don't know how to live in acceptance. And when you live in acceptance, your relationships improve because your goal is not trying to make somebody your project to fix them, nor are you treating yourself like that. Let's talk about energy. This is a big deal for me because under perfectionism, your energy is constantly under pressure, influenced by stress, and it is I always in my presentations when I have slides, there's always, God has a funny way of just letting me put right there a release of perfectionism. Because there's always a typo that's missed. Influenced by stress. It's supposed to be fed. It says field. It's fueled by stress and fueled by an underlying anger. No, it's fed, but it's fed by an underlying anger. So there's, like I said, there's this deep-seated anger that it's your fuel. And so quite often perfectionists are in constant burnout. They're always burnt out and they're always like, I can't take it anymore. Life is just so hard. Things are just so difficult for me. Perfectionists might think a vacation's going to help. It doesn't. It's not even a Band-Aid. In fact, vacations make perfectionists miserable because they can't enjoy anything. What they don't understand is they need to change their whole approach to how they do life. A vacation isn't going to solve this. But the good news is with perfectionism, your energy is more free to flow without pressure, and you know when to give your energy a rest. You know when to stop. You know how to see things in a whole different way. I remember years ago when I was doing a lot of research and book writing, well, the start of it in those years, which to this day I do a lot of it. And I remember when I would sit down at the computer, I don't know if some of you can relate to this. I would sit down on the computer and I'd be working on, at that time, a sermon because I was preaching or a book project. And after a little bit of time, I just feel just on my neck, this pressure. My eyes were burning. I just felt this head over my head. And I was just like, oh, man. And what I realized, instead of like being hard on myself, because I'd go, come on, Mark, what's the matter? And I'd push my way through and then I'd feel worse. Then I just pause. And I reflected lovingly. And I realized, wow, there's such a subconscious pressure. As I'm writing, I got to make this writing just right. It's not going to allow me to flow. And I realized it's actually making productivity worse to live under this constant pressure. Now, perfectionists, they procrastinate a lot. And they do things at the last minute. And they wait for that pressure to arrive. And then they're like, yeah, I thrive under pressure. And I would say over time, that's very unhealthy because it doesn't allow you to live in the enjoyment. It's always crisis to crisis to crisis kind of thing. So going back to my writing, what I began to do is when I would sit down and write, I would just pause. And I would say, Father, I give you the pressure of this. There's no pressure in you. So I lean into the enjoyment of this. And I've done this with many things. I've done this with home renovation. I've done it with mowing the lawn. I've done it with landscaping. I've done it with writing projects. I've done it with meetings because I've been used to living a life under pressure and a lot of it self-pressure. And I had to put it in practical. Father, I release pressure. There is no pressure and I let it go and give it to you. Interestingly enough, I learned by taking the pressure off, I started to see a little bit better. Like when I say see, discern better. And I realized one of the reasons I was getting headaches was I actually needed glasses. And so I went, this eye over here is a little bit less powerful than this one over here. And so this lens doesn't even really, I don't think it even has a prescription. It may be slight. It's this one that has it. So what was happening was I'm sitting there looking at a screen and my brain's having to work harder to bring that into focus. So it's adding to the headache. It's adding to the eye pain. It's adding to even pressure on my shoulders. I wouldn't have discovered that if I wasn't kinder to myself. Because as I was kinder to myself, let the pressure go, well, I might need to get my eyes checked. See, that's what happens when we engage compassionate grace. We see things we didn't see before. And we're under all the weight of this pressure. With life outcomes, with perfectionism, you're constantly disturbed by outcomes. You can't let stuff go. You can't let go how well you're doing. You can't move on. So therefore, you have a lot of control issues, and it manifests in a lot of ways. Without perfectionism, though, you could put your whole heart into it, but you leave the results in God's hands. There's a saying in basketball, or you can say it really in any sport. You leave it on the court. You leave it on the field. You're not in control of all the results. You're just responsible to show up and be present, to offer who you are to the world. That's it. And life out, if it goes great, it goes great. If it goes a certain direction, wonderful. If not, it's okay. I'm learning. Which leads me to the biggest contrast with perfectionism and without it. It's how you handle mistakes. This is the biggest contrast, because with perfectionism, mistakes equal failure, and you avoid failure at all costs. You avoid being seen as a failure at all costs, because the fear of failure and shame drives your life. Without perfectionism, you learn from mistakes. Give me your biggest problems, your biggest sins, your struggles of the past. There are beautiful jewels of learning available there. But we can't extract it because we're hiding from it, shaming it, because we think we will no longer be loved. God won't accept us. People won't love us. So we do everything we can to hide that. But without perfectionism, you learn from that stuff, and you learn to embrace mistakes and even appreciate them. The greatest learning is in practicing. And that's why many perfectionists become procrastinators, because they delay practicing because they don't want to look bad showing something that they didn't do well or didn't work out. We hate being seen in that kind of light. But here's the truth I've learned. We don't learn the most from successes. It'd be great if we did. And especially with perfectionists, any success, you just quickly move on to the next thing. And then you create this bigger standard. And the next thing's got to be even bigger, even better. I remember in my preaching, I'd have this great service and the message seemed to go great. Oh, next time I better really bring the rain. It's this exhausting, never-ending paralysis that goes on. We're so fearful of mistakes. The torment of it is debilitating. And I think our culture is so filled with perfectionistic standards that we often are ready to stone someone in judgment the moment they begin to show flaws or mistakes. So this increases the shame threshold by which we live. So we're all carrying these battles with shame, but because culture and the church can be really bad at this, we're quick to throw stones, it increases shame's voice to say, don't let any of this be seen and shown. Even though your strengths and weaknesses are all a big part of your blessing to people. The greatest blessing you are to people is being yourself and letting the good, bad, and the ugly all be a part of what you offer. Many of you, you're encouraged and you appreciate that Melissa and I, we are on our journey and we're sharing with you what has helped. And we're walking on that journey along the way and inviting you with us, not presenting ourselves as these experts or these people on these high platforms. But really, we're your brother and we're your sister walking this journey. That's taken some learning. And at times, it's been excruciatingly fearful to present flaws, for you to see struggles. We've even done episodes where we sit down and just express it out and how it's happened. And some of that's like, am I going to be loved? Am I going to be okay? Am I going to be okay? And want to tempt compulsive behavior to control. No. And I'm leaning into it. I'm just letting myself leaning into it, even if I feel goofy and shaky and nervous all the way, because that's where the beauty is. The freedom is found. With this perfectionism, you're so easily prone even to depression because of how you feel about yourself. and your past mistakes and your disappointments and your sins and your struggles. And you live in a life to keep hiding them, which leads me to the next part of this, which has to do with weaknesses. It kind of ties into the previous one. With perfectionism, you do everything you can to hide your weaknesses, or you incessantly try to fix them. Because if people see your weaknesses, you believe you'll not be accepted or loved. That's a core place. And those of you that have seen my shame abandonment videos and fear, you'll know I won't be loved, I won't be accepted, and then I'm going to die. That's the lie it keeps telling you. People will leave me, they won't love me, and then I'm going to die. Now, without perfectionism being a factor anymore, you can lean into your weaknesses and you can embrace them. You can hug them. You appreciate the frail and the human aspects of who you are. I had a counselor tell me once, Mark, you need to appreciate the humanity of your struggle, the humanity of your journey, because we've been trained to be superheroes. We've been trained to live in this plane that doesn't allow, like Paul said, when he said, I can boast in these weaknesses. I don't know that I can place myself as living that out, that I'm boasting in my weaknesses. But I'm getting there and I'm on my journey, and so are you. That's pretty awesome to be able to boast in it, to see the beauty of God's grace and that he's working in your life along a journey. Because see, grace points to a journey. Perfectionism points to you got to be all set by last week, and it's never enough. Grace is like, just keep walking. Just keep walking. We're going to discover some amazing things. With perfectionism, your focus is you're always focusing on your flaws, on others' flaws, mistakes, failures, and then you discount and minimize successes. You're in this like sad state, so you respond to it with pity, right? Rather than learning. It's like, oh, I'm never know this thing, and this cycle continues. The mistakes become magnified while the good things become occluded from view and unappreciated. Even when huge victories come, perfectionists place a higher burden for the next time. I got to go next time. It's got to be better. Now, without perfectionism, you learn to celebrate your victories, appreciate them, rejoice in them. Maybe even take a pause and just reflect on God's goodness, and you learn from mistakes. Really what I'm talking about without perfectionism here in this focus is optimism. You learn to carry a sense of optimism. Optimism does not get stuck in victories, doesn't get stuck in defeats. It sees things for what it is, and it finds ways to see it so that you move forward productively in a healthy way. With perfectionism, your emotional influence is the fear of failure, shame, self-hatred, and unworthiness. It drives and motivates you relentlessly. The motive without perfectionism can be the love and acceptance God has for us. I'm reminded in 2 Corinthians 5:14, where it says, for the love of Christ compels us. A reliance on his grace is important here. A real reliance on his grace, his power working in and through my heart towards others. It's relational. And in this, I can be more excited about future challenges because God's not disqualifying me, shaming me, rejecting me, casting me aside. He has my back. I'm reminded of Romans 8:31 that says, if God be for us, who can be against us? There's this sense of like excitement that's back for the journey. Now I'm going to get a little bit more into the nitty gritty and some of the challenging things in these last few. But this is where the rubber meets the road. And I know this personally, is in the area of criticism. Because those with perfectionistic strongholds in their life, they take criticism personally and they have a constant need to defend themselves. Because they have an underlying shame that gets poked at every time they feel like their image of just right is being hit at. They become trained to overreact with issues that shouldn't be taken that way. Many times the anger lashes out. But without perfectionism, we can put criticism in its proper place. You can learn from it. A lot of times you just put it aside. People are just being critical. There's nothing helpful there. Just put it aside. Sometimes you can even laugh at it. And I'm learning to do this more and more in my life, and I see the fruit of it and what it does. And this ties into correction because you can't really correct perfectionists. They become highly defensive. They get easily angered. Even if you do it well, Because, I mean, we bring correction. It's also about somebody bringing it well and being the right person to do it. Sometimes we feel we got to go correct somebody, and we got no business correcting that person. We don't even have a relationship, in that way. But even when it's happening effectively or in a kind way, they still get angry. Without perfectionism, you can receive correction. You can welcome it. Because you realize your performance or how you do things isn't tied to your worth. So you become better from the input of those around you. The fruit of perfectionists is they lack contentment. And they don't even like the word contentment. They see it as compromise, giving up, or being passive. But they're not content. They're not able to experience the contentment that Paul expressed in Philippians 4, where he said, I've learned in whatever state I'm in to be content. Without perfectionism, we can learn. Now, I need to explain this. We learn to connect to gratitude, and we learn through experience how to find contentment. What do I mean by that? Well, gratitude becomes a foundation. You see all of life through gratitude. Gratitude is always a very great place to reboot our mental health. Always great to reboot to that place of gratitude. But how do we learn contentment? You got to go through stuff that will scream at you to not be in contentment, right? Paul was like, I've learned to be abased. I've learned to abound. In other words, I've learned to be in that rough situation. I've learned to be in that great situation. I learned to be broke. I learned to have everything I need and more. I've learned to be in this situation where it seems like lack. I've learned to be in this situation where it seems like abundance, but in all things, I'm all right. And see, how do we learn that? You often have to go through different seasons to practice it. You got to be in it to learn it, to then it be a part of your journey. Does that make sense? And I remember during certain seasons that word of contentment coming up in my heart and how it began to ground me. Took the pressure off of me. I have to fix all the seasons I'm going through. Because many of you are trying to fix the season you're going through. And you just land in it. Let contentment, God, I have everything I need right now to walk through this season I'm in. I find that to be very, very helpful. God, I have everything I need right now to walk through this season, because perfectionists are always looking at what they don't have, what they think God is not doing, what they think they are entitled to, or what they think they should have. And the healing of contentment is, I've got everything I need right now. So I'm not living out of a place where I'm always in lack looking outside, because then what we're doing is we're looking outside of ourselves for happiness, outside of ourselves for blessing. We're trying to find something somewhere over the rainbow will make me happy. Instead, it's, I've got everything I need. And I'm learning through this how to calibrate that by experience. I'm going to close with this. In our relationship world, this is where I pray for you that there will be great fruit in your freedom. Because under perfectionism, your relationship health suffers. Friends and loved ones will have to dodge around your strict inner world. You may not yell and scream at them, but they feel that tension and that stress inside of you. Many will be afraid of you and not feel comfortable even approaching you around certain topics. And I also want to say this too, as your loving brother, many perfectionists are super self-focused. If it goes into OCD, it's very self-focused, me-focused, what I'm going through, what I'm feeling, what's happening with me. And it doesn't let love flow through you because perfectionists lack self-love. They do not know how to see themselves through love. So they avoid it. And they're always trying to do something, fix something, and they're not present in relationship. And I want to propose to you that you can, without perfectionism, you can actually achieve great things and excel. But your relationships don't have to suffer. You know when to say no. You know when to put boundaries. Under perfectionism, you get lost in what you're trying to do while neglecting important relationships like your family. And perfectionists, they are chronic for negatively impacting their marriages and their parenting and their relationships. So don't be overwhelmed with every single statement I made and point I made. Where's God speaking to you? Because my exhortation to you goes back to a scripture that's been very freeing for perfectionistic tendencies. And that's the word Jesus gave. It says, Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden. That's all perfectionists right there. That's all OCDers. That's all heavy, self-pressured people. And this is your word. He said, God, give me a word. Give me a word. Here's your word. I'll give you rest. So take it. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Because here's his nature. This releases us of perfectionism. Gentleness, lowly in heart. He has that posture where he meets us. Isn't that amazing? And you'll find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. I'm praying for freedom from you, brothers and sisters, from this perfectionistic bondage. And I pray that you'll just continue to experience more and more of that in your life, and for those around you who can benefit from this. So if it has been a blessing, please take a moment to share it with others, meditate on it, maybe take some notes and jot down things that have stuck out for you that you can begin applying in your life. Go to markdejesus.com and let others know about these materials. Subscribe to our newsletter, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and be sure to click the button for notifications so you can be aware of any lives or any future broadcasts that are happening. Be sure to donate with a one-time donation or become a regular supporter. Lord willing and the creek don't rise, I'll be back with more resources and materials. In the meantime, this is your brother from another mother saying, I'm out.